Hello and welcome to a UKVersus deck review. Well, deck profile. Following on from Richard's Storm, I thought I'd talk about one of my personal pet decks from set 5. A very underrated character that I have a lot of fun playing, that would be Locklock. The idea behind Locklock is to take away your opponent's foundations. You freeze them down and you then get to draw defensive resources. It's not a fast deck. It is not a deck that you will be able to turn to people. It is probably a deck that is going to be very tedious for both people to play. And if you can get your engines going, your opponents are not really going to have many answers because they don't have many foundations left. So, Locklock himself, twice per turn, after your non-ranged attack deals damage, freeze one rival foundation. It cannot be readied until the start of your next combat phase. That is important for things like keeping Eri safe. It is important for cards like there are a lot of Toga cards that ready themselves up for momentum. There are lots of ways that you can utilize this, and it stops repeated smash from readying things up. It stops a lot of basically a lot of re-readying, which is absolutely brilliant. And then the second part, which is really good, is response at the start of your opponent's combat phase. Draw one card for each each of your rivals' committed foundations. So you commit them down, you freeze them down, you keep them down, and then you turn Locklock sideways, and you get to refill your hand for defense. So what we're going to be looking at is essentially an attack lineup that's going to be difficult to deal with, that is going to deal damage, and that is not ranged. Which is a shame because Stun has a lot of good range cards, but not particularly on these symbols. The All, Earth and Order symbols don't have access to the Chaos and Water and Fire side of Stun. So you're not going to be really accessing much of Shoto 1's kit or any of the Tokiyami stuff. So the first thing to talk about is possibly the best card in the deck, and that is Deadbolt. Deadbolt is a very oppressive card that just says, first form, choose one of the following effects. Name an asset or foundation, commit and freeze all copies of that card. Or commit and freeze up to 2 rival assets or foundations. Being able to freeze assets doesn't benefit with draw ability, but with cards like Trigger, Eri, Twisting Surroundings, there's great ways to interact with Locklock's board and interact with preventing death. Deadbolt basically turns them down, and a great way to get around an already committed board, because just like Fast Hybrid Chimera Kraken, Deadbolt does have that thing of commit and freeze to foundation. If they're already committed out, that's not going to do anything. But then you've got the name an asset or foundation, which is the action. Commit and freeze all copies of the card. So because the action is naming a foundation, you then do as much as you can, which is commit and freeze. So if they're already committed, it doesn't matter because you're committing and freezing all copies of the card. So it basically gets around that wording of Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken. Absolutely love Deadbolt, and it has a nice little static ability on it, which I forgot, which is playable on defense and offense. It discards itself. The main issue is it's a first form, so you only get to do 1 per turn. But if you can do multiple in a turn, that would be nuts. So let's start off with our 4-check attacks. We've got the obvious one that Locklock needs to run on order, which is Electric Jolt. Electric Jolt. It's a free mid for 4 cost with a free check. It goes into momentum face up. It has a momentum ability of flip commit 1 foundation, which is exactly what Locklock wants to do, keep them overextending. And if it's completely blocked, Steel deals 1. So unless they're using an Omni no damage block, Jolt is always dealing 1, which is always putting Locklock online for at least 1 card that turn, and it has stun 1 in itself. It's a great little out. Then we have Vile Seizing. Vile Seizing, absolute beast of a card. Not ranged, perfect. Breaker 1 for defense because we want our opponents overextending. Has a check on face. Check is 7. If they fail it, you get to draw a card and it gets 2 damage. And because Locklock is going to be pushing your opponent's resources, this says you don't get to go into deadlock. If you go into deadlock, you are not stopping my next turn because you won't have the resources, and all your checks get -2. So it's a great way of controlling your opponent's actions by, even if you just check a Vile Seizing, if your opponent sees a Vile Seizing, they now need to be more aware of going into deadlock because this guy gets a little bit nuts. It is probably the most blockable attack in this deck, but if it hits, it's always quite good. The last one is a bit weird, and not too many people will have thought to do this, but I kind of like it. It's Chronostasis Trigger. I'm running it as a 3 of because it is arranged, so it does not freeze under the first Locklock ability, but that doesn't matter. You are limited to twice per turn anyway. So if you go Jolt, then you can't freeze again using Locklock anyway. Chronostasis Trigger, 4 cost, 3 check. 3 mid for 4, same stats as Jolt. Breaker 2 ranged tech. So again, it's in here for the Breaker 2, and it's in here for its first enhance, which is freeze 1 rival foundation. If this attack was played from any other zone than your hand, commit 1 rival foundation. Now Locklock doesn't have the ability to play from other zones, so it's just mainly it's an additional freeze. It just comes in as your third attack, or it can come in and just freeze 1 foundation, target freeze, cool, and then you get to draw 1 extra Locklock. If not, it's also defensive, and it has an evil enhance, which allows you to change zone and seal the character, but Locklock doesn't have evil, so it doesn't make any difference. It's primarily in here for the defensive piece, because a 2 mid block for Breaker 2 is really good, and you get to commit. You get to freeze a foundation, which it gives you additional draw. Then we have this. We have Locklock's attack. He has got another one, but this is the one I primarily tried to focus on, which is Locked Up. So it is a 5 cost, 4 mid 4, again quite easily blockable. 3 check with punch, slam, stun 1. Locklock stun 1, so essentially stun 2, and it has this really cool ability of if it deals damage, you get to freeze 1 foundation committed due to the stun. Now that is absolutely huge. There's a lot of stun hate, a lot of things that get to ready up, and it isn't the greatest early, but if you're going in on turn 3, turn 4, and you've already got a Jolt down in your momentum, you're like, cool, flip 1 with Jolt, stun, if it deals damage, because the second ability, once you have momentum, this attack gets +1 damage, +1 speed, sorry, for each committed rival foundation. It is a speed-based indiscriminate shock, and there are very few times where your opponent is going to look at your board and go, yeah, I'll spend resources to stop 4 damage. If you can get this to 10, 11, 12, that 4 damage goes through. You get to commit. You get to freeze 2 things, one from Locklock, and your opponent is just sitting there going, yeah, I've got no foundations now. And then it goes to momentum, which means it's ready for the next Locked Up. Speaking of recursion, Final Smash. Final Smash is in here because your opponent is going to be building to 8. There are not many characters that can have below 8 foundations and stop Locklock once the engine gets going. It is a 5 high for 6, which demands answers as is. It is a great way to put pressure on your opponent because 6 damage is a lot. It's usually where people start going, do I need to block this? And go back to stat. It's a 6 for 4. It's a 6 cost 3 check with -2 to difficulty. If your opponent has more than 8 or more foundations, The enhance is what allows you to set up the strings and is the main reason why it's in the deck. Final Smash Enhance, take one card from your discard pile, put it on top of your deck. So you can play it and then you can stack a 6-check on top of your deck. Or if you're already set up with 10 foundations, your opponent's, you've already frozen out your opponent, you can then say take a Deadbolt, put it on top of your deck. Then pass turn. Your opponent starts up the turn, you commit Locklock, and you draw the Deadbolt ready for next turn. Your opponent then knows you have that Deadbolt in hand and has to play around that. You're forcing your opponent to think with reactive decisions rather than proactive, which is absolutely great. The last couple of attacks in the deck are Indiscriminate Shock. It is a kill card. It is a card that you generally don't want to be playing. You don't want to be playing it early. It doesn't give you any Locklock advantage. It is your kill card. And the thing is, most people know it's your kill card, which is why things like Final Smash and the Deadlock from Valve Seizing can be so important. Because you get your opponent committed down, you get them to the point where they cannot stop Indiscriminate. And one of the cards that I found most helpful with that is actually Gotcha. We use the commit ability on Indiscriminate to commit Gotcha, get the +1 speed, you make it a 4 for 15, and if it's 3 or 4 attacks in, they're probably not going to have the resources required to be able to stop you. The entire lineup here is kind of designed with oppression and making your opponent make reactive choices. You want to be proactive. If you're in a reactive situation, you need to get that pendulum of motion back in your favor. Jolts are a great way to move the pendulum. Valve Seizings are a great way. Final Smash is absolutely beautiful. If you drop a Final Smash on a 5 and you get that check, you're now sitting pretty, as you're not going to be burning any kind of resources. These attacks, I've gone through other ones, and I was at one point running Setup Strike instead of Chronostasis Trigger. But because a 3/5 that also gets the freeze and sets up more speed, but it's been moved to possible sideboard. I don't have a sideboard actually built up for this yet because I'm just trying to. It's just one I play for kind of fun in events, but it is a lot of fun and it can pull back games. It's very oppressive, and it's a lot of fun to play. Moving on to the foundations. Your foundation, because Locklock is a control character, I need my foundations to highlight that control. Give me a little bit more control aspect. So we've got, as standard, 4 requesting assistance, because once I get momentum, I can keep readying things up. 4 Gotcha. Actively a little bit of stun hate because I don't have defense on face. And as we saw with the Indiscriminate, it allows me to get a little bit more going. 4 Self-Sacrifice. Now, Self-Sacrifice is in here for 2 reasons. 1, I don't have a lot of damage. Damage is not great. So being able to blow up foundations, play around Deadlock, and get more damage on my attacks is really good. And the second reason is I need to be able to block. And Locklock gives me access to a lot of cards in my hand with varying block modifiers, but I don't have defense on face. Once I've run out of cards, I've run out of cards. Once I need to be able to control what's happening on the board, and a great thing you can do with Self-Sacrifice pairs with Heroic Lineage. You tell Self-Sacrifice you blow up 1 foundation to increase the damage of your opponent's attack, and then you commit Heroic Lineage, and you go -3 speed, and they go, oh, yeah, that can work. So you go down in resources, but you make an attack that was not blockable, that your rival did not think was going to be blockable, now much more blockable. But we'll come to the 2s. We've got the Bonds of Friendship, as I showed. They're in there, mainly because Fury attacks are still a thing going around. They're not as bad as punches, but, you know, at this time, Furies are still out there. So being able to flip it for -3 damage seems really good. It can help you. It can keep you alive. And then you can keep stacking it with the final smash. And this is an absolutely beautiful combo. Not the first person to it. Lots of people have done it in the past, but yeah. Calling for backup for a little bit of offensive draw. Gets extra cards in hand. And I'm only running 12 because mainly Locklock does a lot of the drawing. And following the theme of drawing is 4-season Brawler. Now 4-season Brawler in here because unlike calling, they're more conditional than calling for backup. You get to draw on block if they block with an attack, but it's playable while committed. So this is a resource I don't mind committing. And then I get to draw, and it makes my opponent rethink their block zone, well, how they're going to block. If you've got a couple of seasons Brawlers down and your opponent's short on resources, you then get to go, if you block me with an attack, that is positive card draw for me. You are forcing your opponent to rethink decisions and make the choices that may not be the best for them. We've got 3 Ice Glidings. Ice Gliding, absolutely beautiful card. -2/+1 to the next when you're going to block it, and with Locklock you're going to have access to the blocks. It is readyable by requesting assistance, and does an absolute job. A great job of acting defense. Same again as Heroic Lineage. Heroic Lineage comes in. It gives -3 speed after a rival's attack receives a damage bonus, so it makes it a lot more blockable. But it has a second response which does not get used as often, but it can act as a kill condition. When an attack has received a speed bonus, commit. That attack gets +2 damage. So with attacks like Jolt, which has EX, with attacks like Locked Up, which gains speed when you discard a momentum, you can then make them a lot more difficult to deal with and then increase their damage, helping you get to your win condition. You can also use Ice Gliding or Gotcha to increase speed, given the right conditions. So Heroic Lineage works out quite well there. Making a stand is in here primarily for the damage bump onto Indiscriminate, Jolt, and Locked Up. But given the meta of Mirios, given the way how momentum is being used, it's not a bad shout to just flip it and have your rival discard on momentum. It can be a big changer. It can make an attack that was going to kill you with EX or powerful not be able to kill you. Moving into the more control side aspect now, rather than looking at the defensive and drawing power, we've got Conflict of Ideologies. Now, Conflict of Ideologies is probably the reason why I decided to build this on Order rather than All or Earth, because Conflict of Ideologies allows you to deal damage with Jolt, commit it, and freeze another one. If you hit with Locked Up, you get to freeze. If you hit everything for freeze, and then you got requesting to ready it back up, and you've also got the flip. After your Fury attack was not blocked, your rival loses 2 health. That is a kill. If you can get them to 2, and you can just kill them because it doesn't have the stipulation that they can't go below 1. It is just a nice card that, yes, you go down resources, but it's a 1-for-1 with your opponent's resources. And speaking of going down resources, well, then you've also got Final Exam Failures. It's not the best card in the deck. It is primarily in here as a control aspect. You go, cool, early on you can just drop it. That's why it's only 2 off. You flip it, you go make a check in 6. If you fail it, destroy one ready foundation. It can help get your Locked Ups through early on. It can help just deal with problem foundations that are up and get them to be committed down. The last card, and the most annoying card, is Proud Scion. So Proud Scion is a 3-cost, 5 check, +4 block modifier, but you're never really blocking this anyway. Response: at your rival's start step, commit one of their foundations with an ability that grants a speed bonus or penalty. Then you go, so you commit it, and you commit down Ice Gliding, you commit down Heroic Lineage on your opponent's side, you can commit down Nice Try, Specialist of Sound, Lemillion of the Big Three. A lot of cards that your opponent was hoping to be useful in your next turn or in their turn. And then it also has a handy little deadlock response of flip. After your rival plays an ability on a non-character card in their stage, cancel it, flip that card. So if they were hoping to release, if they were hoping to requesting, if they were hoping to use defensive abilities on their board, same with struggling with studies, you just go, no. Once they're in deadlock, you just shut them down. You just absolutely turn around to them and say, yeah, no, you don't get to do what you wanted to do. And that is how this deck kind of works. So, yeah, this is my Locklock deck. I've been working on it for quite some time now. I've been playing it in the webcam locals by Patriot. It got third last week and it won in August. It's a difficult deck to deal with, but if you don't draw the engines or you can't get them set up early enough, then you just don't get to play the game. It happens. It's a fun little deck, and if anyone has any suggestions or takes anything away from this, please let me know in the comments. And if you like mine and Richard's personal deck profiles, please do let us know and we will keep making this content. See you next time.